'Tis the season for giving, and the In at 500's holiday gift package is the perfect present. For only $299, you'll give or receive a cozy night in a deluxe king room to enjoy in 2025, valet parking, $100 for on-site dining, and you can make it even merrier and upgrade to a suite for only $100 more. This deal is only available until December 24th, so call 208-227-0500 or visit inat500.com/holiday gift package. Give joy, give luxury, give the In at 500. Boise, are you already tired of the inversion? Why not escape to the lush forests of the Oregon coast? Salishan Coastal Lodge by SCPs is waiting to welcome you, whether you're looking for adventure or a chance to unwind. Make time to reconnect with yourself, loved ones, and nature while enjoying 20% off stays with code CITYCAST. From spa treatments to zip lining and forest hikes, Salishan has everything you're looking for in a getaway. Make 2025 a year of intentional restorative travel. Book your stay at salishan.com with code CITYCAST to save 20% and start the year with purpose and connection. Today on CityCast Boise, we've been called everything this year, from one of the most livable cities to a terrible place for new grads. But do these reviews reflect the reality of living here? We're digging into these contradictory rankings to see how they shape the perceptions of our area and asking if these titles are fueling our growth or just complicating it. It's Tuesday, December 17th. I'm Lindsay Van Allen, and this is what Boise's talking about. Joining me today is our executive producer, Frankie Barnhill. Thanks for being here today, Frankie.
Hey, Lindsay. A good time to review, I guess, what lists we were on in 2024?
Yeah, one thing you can always count on at this point is that Boise will be on a lot of lists that say it's a great place to live or it's a terrible place to live. In fact, we found 18 studies that Boise was on in 2024. There's probably a lot more.
Yeah, probably.
That was
That's just what we found. Yeah.
A quick Google search. That's what we found.
Yeah, for this year alone.
Yeah, just for this year. And it's not a new trend, right, Frankie? Like, this isn't just in 2024. I mean, it really picked up during the pandemic, but Boise's been making lists for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking back to when I was a reporter at Boise State Public Radio. I feel like I started reporting on the lists that Boise was making in like 2014. So I'm going to say it's been a solid decade of us making some kind of national list or another. And I can also say with assurance that the enthusiasm for these lists has changed and the attitudes towards them has changed from locals significantly in those 10 years. Like, I remember when we first started showing up on lists and people were like, yeah, finally, Boise's being known for being a great place to live. And then the story started to change very rapidly and people were like, shh. Stop talking about us. Don't put us on these lists. We don't want more people moving here. We're closed. Attitude started creeping in.
Yeah. The first category of lists that I want us to get into are the, Boise quality of life. Is this a good place to live? Is it a livable city? Do you feel like that category is a blessing now or a curse for Boise?
Ugh. Great question. And it's a question that the city leaders have wrestled with, like the livability question. Boise had this like tagline of becoming the most livable place in the country for a long time or something like that. And, I'm sure that's still a goal. People want a place to be livable. I think the question is, what is that definition? Livable for whom is probably a follow-up question that we need to ask. And I think that, in some ways, these lists can be PR that is, no offense to PR folks, but marketing can be a little bit of veneer over some places that are very complex and have problems, while also still being places that people are passionate about and love and are proud of and happy to live in or get the opportunity to move to. Kind of all the above. I don't know. How do you feel about the livability question, like that definition of livability and what it means to you?
I think it's very complicated. And I feel like a lot of times it can't really be quantified in these lists. In 2024 alone, U.S. News ranked us number 2 out of 150 major cities for best places to live in the U.S.
Number 2.
Number 2. That's pretty big. Business Insider ranked Boise second as best place to live. Livability and Money Magazine listed Boise as one of the best places to live. And I think you hit on something very crucial. Livable for whom? And what does that mean compared to these other cities? And what kind of a presentation does that give for Boise? Because Boise isn't in a bubble. It exists in the context of Idaho. And so there are things that are great about Boise that are really hampered by Idaho or are very different than what the rest of the state looks like. Do you think that some of these livability or best place to live polls or rankings give a false impression of Boise, or do you think it's accurate even within the context of being within Idaho?
Well, that's a great distinction. I think we're going to each ranking, and honestly, it depends on the methodology, as you alluded to. Like, okay, I'll take the U.S. News one, where we came in number 2 after Naples, Florida, and right before Colorado Springs, Colorado. And when I, click in to see like, okay, exactly how did this ranking occur? It's based on a few different things, according to, U.S. News arbitrarily deciding this. Quality of life came in at 7.4 for Boise. And then you go, what does that mean? What equals quality of life? How are they measuring this? And I do think that as far as, how much Idaho's quality of life questions and where do they overlap with Boise? I think this one, it seems like they really are honing in on Boise alone. One of the things they looked at was commute time, and that Boise's commute time is lower than the national average, but still very much relies on single family cars, right? On people on the road driving themselves to work, driving themselves to the store, et cetera. And so depending on how you feel about public transit, which our score was very low, our walking score was very low, our cycling score was very low. Apparently U.S. News and World Report is okay with that. And they think that overall the quality of life, including our commute time, means that we're a good place to live. I think, if you have a car, you're pretty happy getting around Boise still. And yes, people complain about the traffic. It is getting worse, but you're still able to get from point A to B, usually in 30 minutes or less, especially if you're in the city limits. But, if you can't afford a car and you really need to rely on that public transit, your life's not great, at least when it comes to commuting. So arbitrary. Were there any others that stood out to you in this question?
Well, with that same U.S. News report and ranking, they did acknowledge that housing in Boise is like $150,000 more than the national average, but our wages are not significantly higher than the national average. So if you can't afford housing here, how livable is it?
Right. Like literally, how do you live?
I think that's a really interesting. And so I don't know how heavily that was weighted, but I think sometimes when people look at these lists and they're like, it's a smallish sized city. It's got the green belt. It's got, some nature paths and trails. Like it's super livable. Crime is low. Like in all of these lists, it's always like crime is low. Crime is low.
Yep.
But there are more factors to livability than just crime being low. Can you buy housing? Can you afford your rent? That's a pretty big factor in whether it's a livable city or not. And that is becoming more and more of an issue with our supply of housing, with our lack of affordable housing every single day. So at what point when these lists keep saying like we're super livable, but nobody can get a house?
Yes.
How livable are we? Like at what point does that tip the scales to make us a little less livable?
Yeah. And that goes back to what we talked about how these lists, when they were first happening, and Boise was popping up on these national lists like a decade ago, it was so exciting. And now, because of so many people moving to Boise, because of it having the reputation of being a livable place, is that a self-fulfilling anti-prophecy, right? That it's becoming less livable because so many people think it's livable.
I definitely think that's that curse factor.
Yeah,
that
it's the curse. Right,
if you're
right.
at the top of the list for
Totally.
a decade, tens of thousands of people move in, it makes your city a little less livable.
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, on this show, we're always like, we're celebrating Boise. We love Boise. We care about the community and the Treasure Valley so much. And we're also okay with critiquing the place that we live, that we love, and that we want to see do better or be better or be more open to more people. I mean, that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it is a good time to reflect on the year that was in 2024 and go like, okay, where did we land? And where did we land in the national consciousness? And what do they think of us? And do we think that is accurate?
Yeah. And then what kind of an impact is that having on the people who live here? I do want to note, I think it's very interesting that U.S. News also ranked Boise as the number 5 best place to retire in the U.S. And clearly all the California cops with their pensions saw that and moved to Eagle. So that is having an impact.
Yeah, these lists get circulated in Facebook groups and Reddit threads about people wanting to move to different states. And we're seeing these migrations across the country and people choosing to move one place or another for various reasons. And you're right. Yeah, we're seeing that play out in the numbers as far as like Idaho's demographic overall being one where a lot of retirees, a lot of boomers loving to move to Idaho. And, you know, good for them. They're living their best life. And the question is, what does that mean for the community as a whole when that kind of demographic shift happens?
I also think it's very interesting in the livability ranking that listed us one of the best places in the country to live. Boise was highly ranked as very walkable. And I don't know what the criteria for that was, but I'm just thinking, like, dig in a little bit to these rankings, because I would not say we are a highly walkable city.
Yeah. If you live on 13th Street in the North End, it's a livable city.
Hyde Park neighborhood is very walkable.
Incredibly walkable and incredibly expensive. Yeah, great point. And that's where, you know, I like to look at these lists and guffaw at them and poke fun at them, but also recognize like, they maybe got that one right, but I don't know who the livability author was for this particular one, but I feel like they needed to go spend some time on the West Bench and walk around and see how walkable it feels after a day.
Yeah, how walkable is West Boise?
Yeah, exactly.
Ryan Reynolds here for Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
Okay, Frankie, another category that I definitely want to talk about is the conflicting lists.
Ooh, yes.
And this was,
we had a couple of these.
Was kind of a big thing this year, where there was one specific category where a list, Wallet Hub, said that Boise was one of the best places for new grads to move. Like, get there, it's going to be booming. Meanwhile, Zumper, an apartment listing website, ranked Boise 96 out of 100 cities, so one of the worst for college grads. So Frankie, what do you make of these really conflicting rankings? One saying, if you're a new grad, absolutely move to Boise. The other one saying, if you're a new grad, do not move to Boise.
I definitely laughed out loud when I realized that there were these two opposing rankings. The Wallet Hub one, I do want to spend a second on it. It came out in May. And you know what? At first, I was like, these Wallet Hub surveys drive me crazy. Like, we get press releases from them all the time. But when I looked into it, I don't know. I feel like their sources, their methodology, how they're actually measuring this question They seem fairly reputable. Like they're using data from the census, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, from Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're going to Indeed. They're going to Glassdoor, obviously, to see what job opportunities there are. The Pew Charitable Trusts, a bunch of other sources that I would consider highly reputable as a journalist. And then, they also list and Wallet Hub Research, which I don't know what that means. So, at least I'm glad to see that it's based mostly on what I would consider pretty reputable sources. And they do things like measure professional opportunities was the most important thing. And specifically what they're talking about is the availability of entry level jobs. And they weight that very high compared to other things. And apparently Boise has a lot of entry level job openings, also has a good number of, the monthly average salary they rate as pretty good and give full weight to it. Median income growth, the unemployment rate, which is true. I mean, Idaho as a whole state and Boise as a city within that state do have lower unemployment rates than a lot of other places around the country. That is absolutely true. So when I actually look at this one, I'm like, you know what? Maybe there is something to this, and I could see this being an attractive place for young professionals to move. And then I look back at my own personal experience, and I would have to agree. I moved to Boise to get my career started, and that's exactly what Boise gave me. This was a while ago now, and it wasn't immediate, but, I landed my first full-time job in journalism in Boise after striking out when I was living in a much larger city. This was during the Great Recession, yada, yada, side notes. But I do feel like overall, the Wallet Hub one, when I saw it come out, I was like, maybe that's true.
What do you think the impact is of maybe conflicting lists where, let's say you're getting ready to graduate from college, you see the Wallet Hub one that says it's a great place. There's one by Axios that says it is a great place, but that one is based entirely on how many job applications were received in the area versus the Zumper one that says it's not a good place. What kind of an impact do you think these conflicted rankings would have on whether you'd apply for a job here or not?
I'd be confused, and I would want to talk with someone who actually lives in Boise to give me the straight info. And that's the thing, is it's an incomplete picture. It's not complete. The more complete picture that Zumper shows is that, sure, you might land a job pretty easily, and hopefully that job is one that you're not working over 40 hours a week, and you've got time to have fun and extra money to spend if you can find housing that you can afford. So I just say that these lists, when they're competing, they make me laugh and they make me just go, this is why Boise is such a complex and interesting place to talk about.
For over 50 years, Burlington's legacy has been great deals on coats for all weather conditions. So before you're caught unprepared for the winter weather, head to Burlington for name brands, quality items, and surprising fits for every family member. Stock up on coats, sweaters, and accessories before the cold hits, so you can finally stop avoiding the elements and start living comfortably. Warm up at your nearest Burlington location less than 1 mile away. Burlington. Deals, brands, wow.
Okay, Frankie, there is one list that I was excited about. Meridian made a list.
Yeah,
and that doesn't happen very often, and it wasn't a bad list. We were named by Fortune as the number 30 best place for families. Now, the criteria is a little fuzzy because it doesn't say exactly how things were weighted or why the ranking is the way that it is. And as some of the amenities listed for Meridian is the village. So
sure. Yeah.
I guess maybe if you're not from here, that's an amenity where you'd be like, there's a large outdoor shopping center with a theater. They also say that the brick buildings and bungalows in downtown Meridian lend character.
What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah, you're the Meridianite on the call. So what do you think about this?
My Meridianites, please don't come for me. It's getting better.
Okay.
But I have to say, compared to some other cities and areas around here, Meridian downtown is a little bit soulless. And there are groups and restaurants that are working to change that. They are fighting to make Meridian downtown much better, and I appreciate their efforts. But as someone who lives here, the way they describe downtown is not exactly how I would describe it as somebody who lives here. It sounds very, very, very picturesque.
Yeah.
And maybe like a very center of the city kind of experience. And that's not exactly how Meridian is. Like, it doesn't mention, the sprawling suburbs with, 17 chicken restaurants.
Right.
Definitely doesn't. It gives like a small
Eagle
town, like you're going to be in a,
Yeah.
it's like you're going to
Yeah.
be in a Hallmark movie. And that's maybe not the vibe of Meridian. It can be sometimes, but not, that's not entirely accurate. But I will say, like, I choose to live in Meridian. I am choosing to raise my kids in Meridian. And I think it is a relatively good place to raise kids. I have some issues with the school district and certain, different aspects of the city and maybe how we're managing growth would be a big issue for me. But you could do worse. And I don't disagree with the list. I think compared to a lot of other cities, Meridian is a decent place to raise a family. Asterisk, it is in Idaho. That also will be affected by what your family looks like or how members of your family identify, because that is a huge impact also. It doesn't matter how many, that the village is here and aspects of our downtown are picturesque if your child can't get medications that they need.
Yeah. Or even if there's enough doctors in town, but they're not able to prescribe the care that your kid needs, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's, again, some of these lists, it is such a very narrow picture. And I wonder if people look at that and they're like, I'm not happy where I'm at. The grass is definitely going to be greener in Boise or Meridian. And I don't think in all cases that's accurate.
Yeah. I look at who else made that list, and it's, it's a lot of suburbs. So this list is definitely favoring suburbs, some small towns that aren't necessarily suburbs, but plenty of other suburban kind of areas across the country. And, Meridian has good parks, right? Like, you've got great parks in that town for families. There's, as you mentioned, there's definitely like new facilities, slightly, not as many options of things to do in Meridian as in Boise, but at the same time, as family units, it's so like neighborhood based, I would assume. Yes. Speaking as the child-free person on the call.
You were absolutely right. The park situation in Meridian is amazing and really one of the best parts of the city. I can't recommend it enough. It is like, I live close enough to a park. I can just send my kids. It's no big deal. Lots of park time for our family. Some pretty good walking paths. Really lots of family-focused outdoor recreational areas in Meridian, which is really good considering that is the population a lot of times who is choosing to live here. I definitely wouldn't say we're walkable. That we are a very car-based city.
In fact, it might be dangerous to send your kids out there, right?
It is. So there are pros and cons. I'm glad to see Meridian on a list. I don't disagree all the way. I just think there are a lot of factors that in these rankings, you don't see how they're weighted.
Right. And the counterpoint that's not Idaho or not Boise or Meridian based, but Idaho based, back to Wallet Hub, they did a survey that shows that Idaho is one of the worst places to raise a family. It came in 38 out of the 50 states. And the methodology for this one included share of families with young children. I think there are a lot of young children, families with young children in Idaho, but other factors like number of attractions came in fairly low, fitness and recreational areas, share of children age 0 to 17 who live in neighborhoods with a park or playground. This is statewide, though. They also included, pediatricians per capita. Quality of the public hospitals, infant mortality rate, life expectancy at birth, a number of other, educational, like childcare. Oh boy. Do we even go there? And again, this is a statewide ranking, but it depends on what you're looking for and what stage your family's in their lives, what stage your kids are in, and what needs they might have. We know that the childcare crisis is acute throughout the Treasure Valley, and it's not getting any better. And the state legislature doesn't seem to have any interest in fixing that problem right now. Yeah, this is an interesting one.
It is. It almost feels a little bit like certain parts of Idaho, Boise and Meridian, are being ranked as great cities to live in. But the state overall does not have a good ranking. In that Wallet Hub ranking, Idaho is ranked 35th, so quite close to the bottom. I'm going to ruffle some feathers here. California was ranked 22nd. So California came out as better for families. I know people are going to have feelings about that. But based on that criteria, California came out on top of Idaho when it comes to families. But again, it really is a mixed bag, because then Boise was ranked number 5 by the Tech National as low tax cities to raise a family. So a big factor in that was that the tax burden here is quite low. And so in their perspective, that makes it a better place to raise a family. And so one thing that's so funny about all these rankings is what the focus is. Like, well, how many taxes do you have? Okay, but like what access to childcare? Okay, but walkability or drivability? There's like, do you think these rankings actually have much value? Or is it something where if you want to see Boise ranked high, you're going to just see the rankings where Boise's ranked high and be like, yeah, that confirms what I already believe. And the people who don't want Idaho or Boise to be ranked very high will see the opposite ones and be like, exactly. Yeah. Do you think it changes anyone's mind, or do you think it just confirms people's biases?
I think it mostly confirms biases or confuses you more, and it really just makes the picture more muddled, which again, hopefully that's where we're coming in to kind of help to at least give the nuance that's missing from some of these. You mentioned the low tax burden one is fascinating, because then we're also talking about, well, there's not enough sidewalks, or, there's not enough parks. And it's like, taxes, parks. Like, if you have low taxes, then maybe that's part of why there aren't great parks nearby. It also makes me think about, affordability overall, and specifically home buying affordability, which we've already talked about. But, Idaho has become one of the least affordable states for home buyers since COVID, and even less affordable than California. So, that also again speaks to, and this is from data from the National Association of Realtors. So that also speaks to, again, this kind of like migration across states, why people are choosing to move from one place to another. But for Californians, if they're necessarily expecting that it's going to be cheaper in Idaho, that's not necessarily true anymore. It depends. It totally depends.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One last ranking that I think was kind of cool, kind of a feather in the cap of Boise or Idaho, was from National Geographic.
Oh, yeah. I'm so glad you brought this one up.
And it ranks us as one of the best places to travel to in 2025. And I thought the reasoning behind it was so unique, or something that I'm like, I guess I'm just used to it, but it is really unique and interesting. And sometimes I guess maybe in Boise, we take it for granted.
Yeah, I love that they did this, and this is fun because, it's a little glimpse into the next year. Right. We are used to the fact that Idaho, and Boise in particular, has one of the highest concentrations of people from the Basque Country. And this is something that's going to be extremely relevant next year, because for the first time in 10 years, the Basque community is going to be putting on their festival called Hayaldi. And people from the Spanish Basque Country, from the French Basque Country, will be traveling to Idaho and to Boise to party with Boiseans for this. So I think that was really cool to see that National Geographic clocked it. We're on the list with places all around the world for places to visit next year. And I think it's a great note of, a part of Boise's culture that we do celebrate regularly. But I think we kind of forget sometimes that we stand out in this one very specific way, so much so that, people from around the world are going to be visiting us next year.
Okay, Frankie, I have to ask, if you were going to rank Boise on a top 10 and bottom 10 list, you're making your own ranking. It can be anything, as serious or unserious as you want to be. What would Boise be a top 10 on your list for? And what would it be a bottom of the pack?
I think for my bottom 10, it's going to have to be, and again, yes, not scientific, just the walkability. I really do. I'm going to discount that majorly and say that, the sprawl that happened in the 70s and 80s in Boise really screwed the city. And there's been efforts and continue to be efforts to make that better. But man, there's plenty of sidewalks that don't even exist in Boise city limits still, especially on the bench. And it can be rough to try to get around by foot, let alone bike or bus or any other transit. What about you? Do you have top 10, bottom 10?
We would have a similar top 10 list. I was going to say local coffee roasters because I'd say even the past decade, they have stepped up their game so well.
Yes.
The coffee here, if you can't find a good cup of coffee, it's because you're not looking.
It's your problem. You did it wrong.
It's everywhere. You don't even have to try. You practically walk downtown. Somebody's going to hand you delicious coffee. You just follow your nose. You're going to find it. I think Boise does coffee really well. We can make a top 10 list for that. Bottom 10. This one's going to be controversial, but it's really how I feel. I think we make the bottom 10 of new and trendy drink spots that are not really giving you much to drink. I'm a lightweight, and if I finish 2 of your drinks and I'm not feeling anything, but I paid $17 for each drink, I'm not loving that. I more and more, it does not feel worth it to drink downtown because it feels like it's just really expensive juice pours.
Ooh, that's a good one. I wonder if it might ruffle some downtown bartender feathers, but you know what? I think you might be onto something. It does feel like drinking at home, which sounds bad, that drinking at home is a better idea in some ways, with, all respect to the vibes that we're getting from some really incredible places downtown. But yeah, maybe those cocktails need a little bit more octane.
Well, Frankie, thank you so much. This was so fun to break down all of the lists that Boise's been on. This is something people talk about all the time, and it was really fun to go over it with you.
Yeah, I honestly, real curious to see what lists we make in 2025. So we should do this again.
That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter to stay in the know with what's happening around town this holiday season. We'll be back tomorrow morning with where to find the best local breakfasts. Catch you then.